Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again. This is our third session of our program, Silver Linings, Finding Hope Through Faith. And like we always say at the beginning of every program, the idea behind this program is talking to different people from different faith communities and asking them how their faith is allowing them to experience this whole pandemic and see and find the silver lining. As we know, silver linings are often considered or they are defined as something good and hopeful amidst a gloomy situation. And so today, actually, before I introduce my guest, for all the Muslims out there who might be fasting today, Ramadan Mubarak, it's the first day of Ramadan. So, that's also a very interesting thing we'll talk a little bit about today as well. But my guest today, we actually have two people, a husband and wife, who I like to call the power couple because they're both amazing. But we're talking about particularly from the Jewish community today in terms of the faith. And so I want to welcome Andrea and Rabbi Aryeh. Thank you so much for joining us and being part of this conversation and just sharing your insights so that we can learn from you and your faith tradition. So I know we have we need to be done within an hour, so I'm going to get right into it if that's okay with you. But for a few minutes, I want to also give you a chance to kind of introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and then we'll get started.
Great. Beautiful. Well, first of all, it's really, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk. I'm just so grateful for the work that you all are doing. So I'm Andrea Hodos. I'm the Associate Director at New Ground Muslim Jewish Partnership for Change. And so we run, so I want to say Ramadan Mubarak also. And we do many things at New Ground. The bulk of our program is really running a fellowship for adults annually, and also for high school students. So I've been co-facilitating with Tasneem Noor. And then we also have public programs. So I would like to invite everyone to our iftar, our virtual iftar, which will be happening on this upcoming Thursday, April 30th. It's going to be about 45 minutes and just an opportunity for us to gather and really reach out and make connections with one another as well as we can during these times.
Thank you, Andrea.
And I'm Aryeh Cohen. I'm a professor of rabbinic literature at the American Jewish University. I'm also the rabbi in residence at Bend the Arc Jewish Action, which is a national social justice organization with chapters all over the country and a large chapter here in Los Angeles in Southern California. And I'm also the co-chair of the board of CLU, Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice, which is an economic justice and immigrant rights organization here in Los Angeles. And Chodesh Tov to everybody. Today is the first day of the month of Iyar, which is the month after the month of Passover. So I do a bunch of different things. My day job is I teach Talmud, rabbinic literature, which is kind of the cornerstone text of the Jewish textual and legal tradition. And I am a social justice activist, rabbi in residence. I hold our interfaith partnerships, and I organize around, to a large extent, immigrant justice, but we also do criminal justice reform and housing justice, and like that. Right now, there's a social distancing car convoy at Adelanto Detention Center protesting the fact that ICE has not released detainees who are in danger because of COVID, because there's no possibility for social distancing and they don't have enough cleaning implements or masks or gloves and things like that.
Mm-hmm. So basically you're saying you have a lot of time on your hand.
I have so much time on my hands. And yes. It's good because there's so much TV to watch.
So much to do, and you clearly don't have enough to do. So thank you for taking this on and joining me as well. One of the first questions that I always like to thank you for both of you for the work that both of you do as well. One of the first things that I like to ask my guests and my colleagues and friends is this pandemic that we're going through, this COVID pandemic, what is probably the most surprising impact that it has thus far had on you personally as two individuals, kind of living through this pandemic? What's been something that's been probably the most surprising impact on you both? I love that. Look at each other.
Yeah. You don't want to go first?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't know how much of it is surprising, but just noting how relationships shift. I've had this thing that's been, I do actually have the most surprising thing. Our children we do not live near our children. We do not live near the rest of our family right now. And, we're communicating with them the way we always do, through WhatsApp and FaceTime and phone and all of that stuff. So I miss them, and I'm really sad that they're not here. And I'm concerned for them in different ways. But it's actually when I see my friends here that might live around the corner, like we get together for a socially distanced, just talk, just to see somebody in person. And they may live around the corner from me, but when it comes time to part ways, I have this sense of longing and sadness. Mm-hmm. And I realize it's like this kind of little bit of grief. I call it tiny grief or small grief. It's not a large grief. I mean, we're very fortunate. There's nothing that we are grieving in our own personal lives at all right now. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, there's this sense of, so that's been surprising for me. And the inability to gather with our community, for all kinds of things, for services, for Passover. It was a very, very different. It was a very different holiday, sure. And we'll talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely. And Rabbi Aryeh, how about you?
So so it was good that you went first, because then I had time to think. So I think a number of things are surprising. One is the smooth way in which things that we do in person moved online. Mm. Not that it's the same thing and it's kind of clunky in the practice of it, but we get together for our community gets together for prayers on Friday nights. The other thing that's unfortunately happened, we've had a number of Shiva services, or morning services, because a couple of friends of ours, their parents have died because of COVID. And so that's become a thing. I've started to notice the way that Shiva is ritualized on, Zoom or whatever other, social platforms in its own way. It's become its own thing. And in a way, it's much more intimate, because you can't, because of the way that the platform is set up, you can't fade into the background unless you turn off your video, but otherwise you're really right there. Another thing that's surprising is, I teach my courses online, and it's much more tiring to teach on Zoom than it is to teach in person. You don't kind of get the same feedback. So that's been interesting, and along with that, I find that I have less time because I think that I have more time, since I think that I'm going to save time by commuting. So you end up stacking classes and meetings one on top of another, because you don't have to go from one place to another, and then you just end up. Sometimes I say, I sit down at whatever it is, 7:30 in the morning. I get up and the day is over. It's just like, because and it's all right there. So that's been surprising, aside from the fact that, pandemic was never on my bucket list. So.
You and mine too, my friend. Both, I think all of us think it wasn't on anyone's bucket list for sure.
Yeah.
So you touched a little bit about on holidays that you kind of have gone through or, mentioned about, or we're going to talk about Passover and also your Friday prayers and Shiva. So for those of us out there who may not be as familiar with the Jewish faith, can you tell us just a little bit about your faith tradition, the Jewish tradition, which I know is, in like 5 minutes, that's nearly impossible. There's so many different variations and things like that. But at the same time, if you could just tell us a little bit about the main foundations and the core beliefs of the Jewish faith.
Okay. So 3,000 years of a tradition and 35
it's injustice.
So I say that the Jewish tradition is, and this is like the Muslim tradition, is a law-based tradition based on scripture. The Jewish tradition is based on a double scripture, the rabbinic legend that they're together with the written law came an oral law. That oral law, ironically, is now written down in thousands and thousands of books of interpretation, commentary, legends. And studying that law is one of the central modes of worship in at least parts of the Jewish community. Side by side with the study, the practice of Judaism is based around a calendar of holidays. There's each week there's a Shabbat, which is a 25-hour celebration marked by not doing activity that impacts the world, more or less, and meals and prayers and gathering in synagogues. There are then seasonal holidays. We just passed Passover. They're called the three pilgrimage holidays: Passover, Shavuot, the one that never really had a good press agent. It's called Pentecost in the Christian tradition, but it's 5 weeks after, 50 days after Passover. It's the day that the rabbis decided that the Torah was given on Sinai. And then Sukkot in the fall, when we go outside and sit in booths. And these are both agricultural holidays, and they're also holidays that partake in the narrative of leaving Egypt and getting to the land of Israel. And then there are more minor holidays. There's Hanukkah, which has gotten a big boost because of Christmas. Hanukkah is a winter holiday. We light candles. It's a very minor holiday, but it's become a more major holiday. And then Purim, which is kind of upside down day, happens in the winter, usually around March, sometime in March. It's exactly a month before Passover, and it celebrates the fact that people wanted to kill us and they didn't. So we drink a lot and have a festival.
And dress in very interesting as well. Yes.
And then there's the daily, every day of the week there are 3 prayers every day, and then aside from that, there are dietary laws, and then just as a caveat on all that, Judaism has a range of denominations, Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, and then on top of that, Reconstructionist and Renewal, and that very badly and simplistically goes from right to left in terms of pious and observance, but actually more in terms of the spectrum of to what extent does one believe that the tradition evolves, and to what extent does one take history into account in practicing the tradition. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
And then just to complicate that further, there's Judaism, and then there's also lots of different Jewishnesses, which means there are lots and lots of people who identify as Jews who really don't identify religiously. It's more of a sort of cultural, familial connection.
Right.
So I think Aryeh often says, like when people say, what does Judaism say about X? Aryeh has a really great saying, which I find really useful, which is whenever someone says Judaism says X, you should also assume that somewhere else Judaism says not X. Yeah. And I think that's probably true for a lot of traditions. And I think it might be particularly useful in thinking about Judaism and Jewishness.
Of course. No, that was great. I mean, you covered a lot of things in a very short amount of time. As you were talking, I was recalling my academic courses, and I was like, wow, he really went through that. And so let me ask you about Passover. So one thing I want to make sure that I understand is, regardless of where you are on the spectrum of Judaism, whether from the right to left, or whether you just associate by a cultural understanding and cultural affinity to the Jewish faith, these holidays are something that's celebrated by all. Am I correct? Okay, so
even more so, Passover has kept the Jewish publishing business in business. Every year there are new. The liturgy for Passover is called the Haggadah, and every year new Haggadot are published. Even though the basic text is the same, but there are all kinds of new texts and new commentaries and going back. And we have Haggadot on manuscript going back to the 9th century in Babylonia and Persia, and all the way up to and then. Yeah. The myth of, the whole story becomes metaphoric because it's a story of liberation. And so therefore there's things called the Freedom Seders, and then there's the Everything Seder. And each year, every organization sends out inserts to read on, to add on to and all kinds of, it's a very symbolic holiday. Mm-hmm. And so therefore people always want to add on more symbols to the holiday. So yes, everybody celebrates Passover, and that's probably because it's a home-based holiday. It's not a synagogue-based holiday.
Okay.
Right. And so the major liturgy is at home. So therefore there's nobody standing over your shoulder, except for your grandmother, of course, to tell you you're doing it wrong, or,
although everybody does that a lot of the time during the Seder.
Right.
That can
Though
also
internally family,
yes.
Of course, it's always about, well, we never did that. How could you do that? Where's this? But that's not between family groups. That's like, that's like Thanksgiving.
There's actually, in the Haggadah, there are two principles that are really, there are many principles and there are many symbols, but there's one that all who add on to the story are praiseworthy. And there's also an idea that it's celebrating the Israelites move out of Egypt, out from under Pharaoh and slavery, and eventually toward Mount Sinai. Mm-hmm. So I just want to say, see the bookshelf that you see behind you, up a little bit more. That whole top, that's only part. Oh, the rest of them are over here because we still have them out. But they're all different Haggadot throughout the years, actually centuries in some cases.
Wow. It's interesting for the Southwest Interfaith Council. The last 2 years, we've done Interfaith Women's Seder. And the same thing, I worked with Rabbi Rebecca from Temple Menorah in Redondo Beach. And it's so interesting because we work with her to create the Haggadah. And so how that, and so you're right, the principles are something that are really applicable to humanity in general. And so so I've learned a lot in that sense, to see the importance of that text and its applicability to everyone, not just the Jewish people, and what's highlighted in there. Now, I know that you said that this is a holiday that's based not necessarily in the synagogue. It's based at home. It's I know part of the Passover is there's a meal, and there's literature that's being shared. And even though it may not be at the synagogue, it is amongst usually family and friends. I've had the tremendous honor of being part of Seders at my Jewish friends' house, and I see the intimacy. I see how important that is, the sense of community amongst friends and family being together. Now, that's probably something that was affected this year, given the pandemic. So I'm really interested to learn, how did you guys deal with that? How did you navigate that?
So usually we have 20, 25 people at our Seder. And usually our Seder goes till, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. But we didn't this year. And it's actually, this year was just the two of us and a friend who's staying here, and an asylum seeker from Honduras. So it was different. There are a lot of people who, what they did, their solution was they had a Zoom Seder. where they, where on the one hand, it was kind of sad that people couldn't come, but on the other hand, it also allowed them to have Seder with people who were geographically removed, people who would not have been able to be in the Seder. For a bit, we were thinking maybe we'd figure out something with our daughter, but then she wanted to have Seder with her roommates.
Okay.
All right. So I think it was a very different Seder because Andrea and I rarely have time to just have Seder with each other, to just sit and talk with each other, because there's usually lots and lots of other people. And we found it's much easier to cook for 3 people than it is to cook for 25 people. Who knew?
So yeah, we were able to find a Haggadah in Spanish.
Oh wow!
So we had Seder with a person who's staying with us, and it was really interesting to go through the story with him. It was a very different thing. There's an idea of asking questions is really important part of the Seder. So there's something called the 4 questions, where we really encourage the children say them, and it's to encourage their curiosity. So it was really interesting. We have Muslim friends over, we've had Christian friends join us, we have very learned Jews at our table, and we have creative people who don't necessarily know. Like, one of the things that I love about our Seder. That's true. That's always the best, when like the learned people are also creative. But we try to get as many different kinds of people around the table, the Seder table. So this time it was just our friend who's with us, and it was interesting to kind of take the journey with him, and to get to hear that. I think the other principle that I meant to mention before was, in every generation, a person has to imagine themselves as if they had come out of Egypt. And I think, Milia, this is where it really does touch potentially on the universal story, the metaphor, using the metaphors of coming through this narrow place out of Egypt into freedom. And to be doing that with someone who's kind of in that process himself, and have him reflecting on the Jewish story, the story of the Jews coming out. It gave a different level of perspective on the story.
You talked about Rabbi Aryeh about these Zoom Seders that happened this year, and you're right, there were a lot of Zoom Seders that happened, and it did allow greater participation. Absolutely. I was part of the one at Temple Bethel, and it was really interesting to me, because you had 100 people online on Zoom, and then you had a list of other people that were trying to get in. And so I remember my colleague, my friend Sarah, and myself, we were part of this, and we were telling them, hey, we can leave, if you want others to join, because we didn't want someone to feel left out. And they're like, no. And the way that they kind of dealt with that is they allowed it to be also aired live on YouTube at that same time. But one of the things I recalled as I was participating in the Seder is, obviously there's a variance of age as well. You have the young people who were there, and then you have more of the elderly people who were there. And for some of the elderly individuals, it was hard. It was hard navigating the whole technology aspect of it, understandably so. We had some people who were talking about dinner and didn't know that they were on, or they were talking on the phone. So this goes towards both of you as leaders in the community, and certainly as to you, Rabbi, as a faith leader in your community. How do is that challenge exists? So how do you deal with that? How do you make sure that those who maybe need this sense of community even more than others that are elderly, who might be by themselves, how do you reach them during this time?
Oh, those are two. Yeah, there are two questions there. I mean, I think the question of how you reach everybody is the more important question to ask. Because like, there are people who are background noise.
Sorry.
there are people who are on a normal basis who live alone, who are elderly, and people will visit them, people will knock on their door. But now that's impossible. That you can't do that, and that's really important to make sure. I mean, every community has phone numbers of their members, and there are city agencies that have there's the Jewish Family Service, which reaches out, and hopefully more and more that people are reaching out in mutual aid networks just to make sure that everybody is touched, and Zoom and other platforms can help with that a lot. Now, yes, there is an age difference in comfort with the technology. But I think that's and part of that has to do with the fact that Zoom was made for business meetings and wasn't made to be instead of being in a community. But I think that will have to be overcome. I think that also communities who want to use this platform to come together and to study or to pray will also have to, for example, you can't sing together on Zoom. I mean, so you have to either not sing together or be more tolerant of the cacophony that happens when you try to sing together. And sometimes that's fun, and so, but you have to, so there are certain, it's different living in the different platforms. I think that communities, most communities have opted for muting everybody and having one leader and everybody follow along at home. Other communities have done it other ways, but I think that's, those kind of, I think the making sure that nobody feels like they're completely left out, which is the real problem of social distancing, is the major problem. The other problems are kind of technological problems and aesthetic problems, which are problems, but they, you gotta chill.
The gradient of problems, they're not as significant as challenges, as significant of challenges others.
I would, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead, please, Andrea.
Like from the Newground perspective, I think we've been, and also from our own little community, I think there are still telephones, right? So we've been reaching out to people we know are older and living on their own. I've been reaching out to some of our Newground folks that way, and just having conversations and just checking in. I know that lots of places have set up phone trees, and not just in the Jewish community, but really all over the place, just checking in on one another like that. I would say that Sarah's in Sarah Dean is in our cohort. We're really so fortunate to have her in this year's Newground cohort. Really what we're trying to do in Newground is to build enduring relationships across authentic relationships across really challenging conversations, important conversations. And those are not easy conversations to have in this format. So, I think that's been a real challenge, is how do we create intimate space, authentic space, to be able to really hear one another with that that veil of technology in between. And at the same time, there's also hunger for it. Like when people's faces, like this happens to me every time Tasneem and I are, getting ready for one of the sessions we've had, and the faces start popping up on the screen. Yeah. And it's like you just start to fill up. So there's both a hunger and a sense that we're not going to be able to have some of the conversations that we want and need to have on the level that we want and need to have them. So there's a sense of longing and hope that, and looking forward to the point at which we'll be able to reconvene and really, and I'm wondering, one of my questions about this is, what do our relationships feel like on the other side of this? I'm really curious to see how our relationships are impacted, and that I feel like our relationships are going to be what gets us through. What relationships between communities, different parts of the community, our internal communities, and communities that we can't touch now who are experiencing really, really difficult things. How do we reach them? When we're doing interfaith justice work or interfaith connection work,
Sure.
I don't know. Aryeh was talking about the car
Yeah, the social
protest. Like, how do we? Yeah.
Actually, that was my next question. I was going to ask you, how is that being? Because that's the first time I heard about a Zoom, protest. And so how is that? Tell me how that's working.
So it's not a Zoom protest. People are in their cars and they're just social distancing. There is, I mean, organizing digitally is harder. I mean, it's usually, the way you organize, use digital tools to organize to get people together in real life, one of the stark images of this time is the fact that all the public spaces are empty. Elected officials aren't in their offices. And so there's some of the stuff you can still do, like you can still write letters, there are city council every once in a while is meeting, and those meetings are on Zoom and are public. But it's much harder to organize, and at the same time there are all kinds of new challenges. The homeless folks who have no place to shelter, people in jails and detention centers and prisons who can't socially distance themselves and are not being taken care of and should be, released, or should be, more, if you're living 8 people in a dorm with one toilet, it's no way to keep yourself healthy. So so there are new challenges, and a lot of the challenges nowadays, and with the economy falling apart, how do we make sure that there are more homeless people because of people not being able to pay rent and people not being able to pay their mortgages? And so there are lots of new challenges at the same time that it's become harder and harder to address those challenges. And so last night we had our monthly community meeting for Bend the Arc online. And people are addressing real issues in really sophisticated ways, and at the same time there is it's harder we have to develop new ways of saying, well, here's the problem, let's go do this as a solution, or to advocate for a solution. Here's the problem, we know what the solution should be, we have to now get online, or we have to figure out how to do what we've always done, but in a new way. At the same time, I have to say there are people who came to the meeting last night, which is usually in Koreatown, who live in the valley but can't usually come because of the traffic. So traffic is much easier on Zoom.
Good point. I want to take a minute just to thank you, Rabbi, and also Andrea and Bend the Arc and all these organizations that are still that haven't given up, right? All these organizations that are committed to social justice and making sure that those, the underserved, those who don't have the rights that they need to have, that they're not being forgotten at this time. It is a challenging time for everyone, but thank you for still being persistent and finding new ways that you could cater to their needs. I think that's, that's a responsibility that, you're right, that's a responsibility that we have regardless of kind of the circumstance in which we live in. And I commend all of you guys for that. We touched a little bit about Passover. We touched about, what the faith entails and the challenges that are here. And I know you said that as Jewish communities, as members of the Jewish faith, you pray 3 times a day. And Passover isn't something that's necessarily associated with being in the synagogue itself. But I know Sabbath services, right? Friday night services, those things, those are integral to a sacred space, to a place of worship. So how is the Jewish community facilitating for that? How does that work now?
It's really different depending on the community. Okay. So because there are parts of the Jewish community, and we're part of that Jewish community, that doesn't use electricity on Shabbat. That doesn't mean we don't so we'll set our lights on. If we're going to be eating here, we set our lights on, so there's light in our dining room, living room. But we turn lights in the bedroom off. That's really important if we want to sleep, right? Mm-hmm. It means that we're not going to be able to gather for our services on the Sabbath. So what we've been doing on Zoom, on Zoom, or I mean with other people outside of our little pod. So what we've been doing in our little do-it-yourself community is there's one service that it's called Kabbalat Shabbat, which is actually the receiving in of the Sabbath. So it's really before it's officially started. So it's singing. So we've been gathering for that, and each of us takes a different psalm and sings that. And then we all get off, and then we have Shabbat in our homes. We live in a walking community. We have to live near one another, or those of us who practice in this particular way. So there are a lot of people who live right around us, and we've set up chairs at socially distanced, at a social distance, like right outside. So we've been doing just a small amount of visiting with one another. The prayers are pretty much on our own. And then we gather at the end of the Sabbath, end of Shabbat, for a service called Havdalah, which means separation, very, very short. And then we do a check-in with one another. So we usually spend, there's an opportunity to spend about an hour together. We've been doing some learning and teaching during that time as well. There are other congregations that are using Zoom for their services.
There are congregations that have already been live streaming their services,
Yeah.
and now they just live stream it without anybody in the congregation. Just the cantor comes in, or whoever's leading services.
So when you say, particularly to the both of you, when you say, during this time, there's teachings that we teach, are you doing that amongst yourselves with the community that's outside? How is that working for you?
It's on Zoom, right? It's like we're all wholly owned subsidiaries of Zoom.
I love the terminology.
So we teach, and these gatherings after the Shabbat is out are on Zoom, and we do the Havdalah, which means a differentiation service, and then there's whatever study different people in the community teach different things. There's no real set. That's a set liturgy. I just want to clarify also on Passover. Normally, people would go to synagogue also, even though but that's the Seder, which is the unique liturgy, is a home based.
Okay, all right.
Please,
Andrea, go.
I would also say one thing, like a really important part of Shabbat is sitting for hours at a table, at a meal, and just visiting. It's like very open. It's time for just being. And so when people come over, that's sort of the being part. We are not eating with anyone. We stay very far apart. We don't have more than one set of visitors at a time. I just want to be very clear about that. We're outside, and we don't, we're not actually doing liturgy stuff together then. It's really just the sort of visiting being part. That's been part of our practice.
Sure.
Yeah. And the other thing that's sad is that the last days of Passover, on the last day of Passover, is the day that there's the prayer for the memorial prayer for people who have passed away. Mm-hmm. And so we couldn't have that because that's only with a quorum. Okay. So there are a lot of people who are, missing that.
Mm-hmm.
And different communities deal with prayer service in a different way, but a lot of the prayer services gather together because of the first year after a person has died, those who grieve him or her say Kaddish, which is called the prayer for the dead, but it's a complicated prayer. But so they do that every day. So some of that is done online, since there are different categories of types of prayers.
Okay. So I want to honor the time. I know both of you have other meetings coming up as well. So we have about 5 minutes left, 4 or 5 minutes left. So as a concluding question, I want to ask you, are there specific stories or scripture or tradition which can offer some guidance or relief or inspiration for all of us during this current time that we're living in, that we can apply and really implement in our lives or learn from, and to help us, all of us, not just Jewish individuals, but Muslims and people of no faith, live through this pandemic that we're going through right now?
So the verse that came to mind immediately when I started thinking about this, weeks ago, especially because it's around Passover, is a verse that's used to describe the final plague, of the death of the firstborn, which is Ein bayit asher ein sham met. There was no house in which there was no dead person, and that the death was all over Egypt and biblical Egypt and this and which caused me to think the bad guys were hit by the plague, and here we're all getting hit by the plague. And so the question is, where can we go? What do we do to find the leverage point, to the inflection point, to show that we can get out to the other side? We are the ones also who can cross the sea. We're not only the ones who are being hit by the plague. And I think that there is the fact that we are closed up in our houses, as the Israelites were on the night of the plague of the firstborn, and part of that reason is that we should not be involved in the cycle of violence. God did this, and I think that if there is for me a kind of a silver lining to the plague, it is that, and it's really hard to see silver linings, but since this is
we're trying our best here.
Yes, the silver lining is that we come inside our houses and we can meditate on that which we have. Those of us who are safe, those of us who are healthy, and knowing that those are the things that we will take with us out of Egypt. Those are our packages that we will take with us out of Egypt.
Right.
And I'm just gonna go right out of that one to one of a really important metaphor for me, which is when the Israelites were on their way out. It says in the text that they walked betoch hayam vayabasha. They walked in the middle of the sea on dry ground, with walls of water on their right and on their left. And there's this understanding, Mitzrayim, the word for Egypt in Hebrew, it means the narrow places. And so they're coming through these narrow places. So we're in these narrow places, and then we get to sing on the other side. When we step onto the ground, it might feel mushy right now. Those walls of water might feel like they're closing in on us. But there's this feeling, all of the different rabbinic teachings in the text itself are stories about faith. How do you put your foot on that solid ground and trust that you can put the next foot down and then the next foot and keep going until you get to the other side? And I feel like this has always been a very rich metaphor. For me, I actually did some art about it at one point.
Wow.
But I feel it. I've been feeling it tremendously now. And there's a psalm that ends min hamitzar. We say it every time there's one of these festival holidays. Min hamitzar karatiya va'anani ba'merchaviya. From the narrow places I called out to you, God, and you answered me from the broad place. And so whether you're a religious person and it's God for you, or it's that humans reaching out to one another to walk through this place together, I think that, from my work in relationships, I think religion is about connecting us to one another and connecting us to God, that we just need to have faith that these relationships that we reach out to others and others will reach back out to us, and we will get each other through.
That's a beautiful way to end. That's absolutely, you're right. Thank you so much. Thank you both of you for your time and for your insights and for what you shared from the Jewish faith. We really, truly are appreciative. We wish you safety and health, and it's Friday, so I know Sabbath is coming up, so have a most blessed Sabbath amongst yourselves, and social distancing Sabbath. And thank you again, and we hope that I look forward to the day that we can gather together, and that how wonderful would it be for me to be in a Seder with all of you one day?
Yes. We'll say next year in Los Angeles. Next year in Jerusalem at the end of our Seder, so next year at our table. And thank you for the work you're doing, Milia.
Thank you. It's been a
course,
pleasure.
of course. I'll have a great afternoon and great weekend. And for the rest of you, thank you again for joining us, and join us again next Monday when we have another session of Silver Linings, Finding Hope Through Faith. Until then, have a great day, and we'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye.